Yagya are these traditional Vedic performances that involve the recitation and application of sound, particular sounds to achieve a particular result, to achieve a particular transformation. So we know throughout the course of time that Yagya is precious and that it works. It has been a cherished technology of kings of old to protect their countries and to promote the good fortune of their countries. Yagya, this Vedic science, let's call it of prevention, has not been as effective as it could be. And we'll talk about how Maharishi restored the full power and effectiveness of Yagya. But let's start with some basics. How could Yagya, how could a technology of sound, essentially, a technology of Vedic recitation, cause any change in the fortune or health of anyone? Or certainly, how could it uplift the life and transform the fortune, the destiny of an entire country? A very good question. And we have the basis of understanding that today. Absolutely have the clear basis of understanding that today. And that basis is the discovery of what are called unified quantum field theories, especially superstring theory, which is the modern realization of Einstein's age-old dream to discover the fundamental unity beneath the surface diversity, surface complexity of the universe. And let's take a look at that, because that'll show us how Yagya works. We have a chart that shows the hierarchical structure of reality, the hierarchical structure of the universe. And this chart shows that the universe is structured in layers, a hierarchy of layers. At the top of the chart is what we call classical physics. This is the world of macroscopic sensory objects, the world in which we're familiar, most familiar. But we also know, certainly today, everybody knows that beneath the macroscopic world of day-to-day objects is the world of the molecule and the world of the atom. This is what is called the domain of quantum mechanics, as shown here, a deeper level of reality. More fundamental still and more successful than quantum theory is something called quantum field theory. Quantum field theory deals with still smaller objects, not atoms, but elementary particles, quarks and leptons and photons and things like that, the elementary building blocks that structure the universe. Finally, most powerful, and where the great breakthroughs have been, is in what is called unified field theory, shown in this chart at the foundation of all the diversity of the universe. In that unified field, we need to understand just a little bit to clearly understand how Yagya, how a technology of sound, can be used to achieve virtually anything. So if we look at the unified field, it is, you could say, an ocean of pure existence, pure energy, pure potentiality, and that energy of pure existence, pure intelligence, pure creativity is not dead, it's not static, it's not inert intelligence, it's dynamic intelligence. And due to this intrinsic dynamism of the unified field, it is continuously roiling within itself, reverberating with itself, shimmering within itself. And as we saw previously, even gives birth to the origin of universes. But as this chart shows here, on a day-to-day basis, we're not percolating universes every day. On a day-to-day basis, the unified field is percolating these little bubbles, which are called superstrings. Little bubbles percolating from the unified field like ginger ale effervesces bubbles. These little bubbles are actually called superstrings because the bubbles coming from the unified field are literally infinitesimal strings, infinitesimal rubber bands. And this is very important. These superstrings, these miniature rubber bands, can vibrate. They can vibrate in different ways, like a rubber band. They can vibrate, rotate to the left, they can rotate to the right, they can vibrate like this, they can vibrate like this. They're a very precise set of vibrational frequencies or tones. These different vibrational states of these superstrings percolating from the unified field map to the elementary particles of nature. What does that mean? It means we used to think of a world of quarks and electrons, protons, neutrons, neutrinos, photons. Those particles basically no longer exist. They have been replaced by the superstring field, and replaced by the superstrings percolating from the superstring field. So depending upon how a particular superstring is vibrating, that superstring will mimic the electron, or it'll behave like a photon. It'll mimic a neutrino, a quark. So it's an amazing thing, as the next chart shows. Next chart shows all the different elementary particles and forces of nature emerging from the unified field. Those fundamental forces of nature in particles are well known. Gravity, electromagnetism, the strong force, the electron, the neutrino, the quarks. And the superstring vibrations map perfectly and explain exactly the elementary particles that fill the universe. The familiar particles that we know and love are not particles at all. Each one is a miniature vibrating rubber band, and depending upon that vibrational state, the mass of that particle is determined, the electric charge of the particle is determined, all the qualities are determined. So the universe is nothing but a symphony. The elementary particles are nothing but tones of the unified field. Like a guitar string, which is a one-dimensional field, has its own reverberant tones, its own natural resonant frequencies. Similarly, the unified field has its natural reverberant frequencies, and those are the elementary particles of nature. So an electron is a note. It's a tone of the unified field, nothing more. And a quark is a different tone. A massless photon is yet a different tone. So the universe is just different frequencies. And you take something more complicated like a proton that is made of 3 quarks. Proton is made of quarks. It's no longer just a tone, but it's 3 tones in one. And that's not a tone, we call that a chord. An atom, which may involve 5 protons and 5 neutrons, each with 3 quarks, and 5 electrons, that's a more complicated chord involving quite a few different tones. If you get something more complicated like a molecule or the DNA molecule, it's more like a symphony. In fact, the whole universe is just one great big cosmic symphony of different resonant tones. Now, we come to the science of Yagya. How do we transform an object that may be unwanted, a situation that may pose danger, or a potential health problem into something more desirable? Well, let's take a look at a simpler challenge. Let's consider, for example, having an electron and desiring something different. Here's an example in this chart of an electron coming in on the left, and let's say we want to change this into an up quark and an up anti-quark coming out on the right. Those are the final, so-called final particles, the results of an interaction, starting with an electron. If you want to create an up quark anti-quark pair, you need to add something. You need to add a positron, a positively charged electron, the electron's antiparticle. And that's what this so-called scattering diagram shows, how an electron, once you add a positron, can interact with each other to produce something completely new, to produce an up anti-quark pair. But we know these particles aren't particles. That's what we've just said. The electron, with which we're starting, is just a certain tone, just a certain frequency. And if we want to produce an up quark and a down quark pair, those are just a different set of tones. To go from one tone to the desired outcome tones, we need to add what? A positron, but that's just a different frequency, a different tone. So basically, when you look at the processes of elementary particles interacting and transforming and interacting and transforming, you're just taking a tone, adding a desired tone to produce, so adding a special tone, a particularly chosen tone, a positron in this case, to produce the desired set of tones. So again, the whole process, we could call it, is a transformation through sound. This whole process is sometimes called the chemistry of sound. You start with a sound, you desire something else, you add the appropriate sound to transform the initial sound into the desired final state sound. So really, all transformation is accomplished through sound. That may just seem like it would be true for elementary particles, but it is true for everything. as the next chart shows. There are just one or two charts left. Next chart shows a familiar chemical transformation. Let us say you are a cell and you want to derive some energy from the sugar, the glucose in the blood. So you start with a sugar molecule, C6H12O6, and you want to turn that into carbon dioxide and water plus energy, liberate some energy by burning the sugar. Well, how do you burn sugar? How does the cell burn sugar? How does a cell oxidize sugar? It adds oxygen. So we have the chemical equation here, which shows that a sugar molecule plus 6 oxygen molecules will give us a carbon dioxide, water, plus energy. But although that may sound like a material transformation, we now know, based on our discussion, that it is all a transformation of sound. This is nothing but the chemistry of sound. Remember, the initial sugar molecule is just a complex sound, a complicated chord, a tone of the unified field. If you want to change that into carbon dioxide and water, you add a particular sound. That particular sound is in the form of oxygen molecules, which are just frequencies themselves. Like this, all transformation in the universe, whether chemistry, whether elementary particle transformations, whether it's a change in clothes, or whether it's the emergence of a disease or the curing of a disease, changing anything into anything is always a process of adding a particular sound to the existing state to produce the desired final state. That is true throughout the universe. All change is accomplished through sound, whether that's very gross sound, which may even have the appearance of matter, or a very, very fine impulse of sound in the case of an elementary particle. So this is how a Yagya works. Yagya is a technology of sound. It employs the chemistry of sound, the scientific fact that through sound you can change anything into anything.